Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar, The Future of BIM and Information Management. My name is Hugh Knipe, and I'm an Enterprise Account Executive at Mail Manager, where I've been helping project and client-based businesses effectively manage their inboxes and overnight eliminate their email headache. We're happy to be joined by Casey Rutland, Founding Director at DigitalGreen, Vice Chair of the UK BIM Alliance, which is now called NEMA. Casey is also Chair of Build Smart UK and Ireland, Workstream Champion at the Government and Industry Interoperability Group, Digital Lead at the Construction Leadership Council Digital Network, and sits on the advisory board of Zero Construct. Casey's a digital advocate with a real focus on digital transformation, with over 20 years of experience as an architect working in and leading multidisciplinary teams to deliver large-scale infrastructure projects. Casey brings a clear, concise, empathy-driven communication method to the seemingly vast topic of digital transformation. As you can probably imagine, Casey's extremely busy, so thank you for joining us, Casey. We're really glad to have you here with us. Before I hand over to Casey, I'd just like to run through the topics of today's webinar. We'll be discussing how BIM has evolved and changed in recent years and its effect on information management, why it's so important for architecture, engineering, and construction, or as we call them, AEC firms, to have a single source of truth. And then we'll get to a frequently forgotten aspect of information management, and that's email. Finally, we'll discuss what this means for ISO standards and compliance. We want this session to be as valuable as possible, so please feel free to make use of the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screens, and we'll answer all those questions at the end. So now I'll hand over to Casey.
Thanks, Hugh. Just give me one moment while I share my screen and get myself set up. Okay, great. Everyone should be able to see the NEMA logo right now. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Hugh. Thanks to the guys at Mail Manager for asking me along to share this, hopefully your last webinar of the calendar year before we'll head off on a little break. So I've got around about 20 minutes to run through a couple of things relating to where we are on our journey from BIM to information management, a little bit about the single source of truth, and then we've got some time for Q&A afterwards, after Hugh's session. I run through my intro because Hugh's done a very good job for me. But here today I'm wearing my NEMA hat predominantly, although all the other roles that I do, needless to say, influence any of my answers in the Q&A. So where are we? For those of you who don't know, the UK BIM Alliance changed our identity around about 2 months ago, the first week of October. And the reasons for those are quite significant. We'd reached almost saturation in terms of the audience we were communicating with. It was almost like we were in an echo chamber and we were talking to the same people over and over again, seeing the same people at events, having the same people in working groups. So we needed to change things up quite significantly, but also the conversations were restricted to various different or typical groups, when actually we need to reach out further into supply chains, further into people involved throughout the entire life cycle. So what we're doing is, the reason we've dropped the B from BIM is because, in quite all honesty, we engage with more people. The minute we start talking about information management to product manufacturers about their products, they're straight in. They're straight in, they know their products, they know the categories, they know what they've got to comply with for regulations, and we're into that conversation straight away. Previously, if we started that conversation with BIM, there is a perception that BIM is about three-dimensional only, and the information stuff is kind of a secondary thing. It's also the perception that BIM is there for design and construction, not necessarily there for life cycle, whereas it actually is, and it always has been. So what we're doing as NEMA is we're looking for better information management across the whole of the built and natural environment. So not just things that are built, but things that need to be managed out there in the built and natural environment. So the current situation, if you didn't already know, is that we've got quite an inefficient and misaligned industry, not necessarily producing all the things as efficiently as we should do, both in the physical world and the virtual world and the data world. And, you know, there's things that can be done. we haven't really got to the point where we can say we fully transitioned to a digital workflow. Throughout this journey, various different steps, various different stages, it's going to be more commonly known that it's possible to ask for information and for that information and data to be supplied in a particular way. And that's really how our other industries, when they've digitally transformed, have managed that. So they know what information and data they need, they know how to procure it, both legally, contractually, and they know who to approach to obtain that information. And then when that information is delivered, it enables the person who asked for it, who specified it, to use that information reliably. And that's really where we need to get to. So ultimately, we'll end up with an efficient, streamlined industry where a data-driven approach enables all the things that we need to do to be done securely, safely, with more accuracy and greater confidence. And I think we can all probably appreciate that we're not in that situation right now. So this is where we're looking to go. And in terms of our scope as NEMA, it's not really changed compared to when we were the UK BIM Alliance. It's always been information management at the centre of what we're doing. There's always going to be BIM elements included. We're certainly not throwing away BIM discussions. They happen to be very useful at the right stage with the right people. We're just using information management as that on-ramp, that introductory discussion about what it is that NEMA can do for the industry. And that is what we are there for. Let's make no mistake about it. NEMA are a non-profit volunteer organisation who are there to serve industry. So if anyone wants to, well, I'll do another call at the end of this presentation, but if anyone wants to get involved and help us out, by all means, get in touch with me and we will gladly take your help. So how have the UK BIM Alliance evolved to NEMA? Before I dive into this slide, it's probably worth noting that it's not just a fancy new name and logo and a nice new easy to use website. It's actually a fundamental change in how we behave. So there was a perception that the UK BIM Alliance had become BIM police and were quite quick in pointing out where people aren't quite doing things they should be doing. What we're doing is that we're flipping that around completely. And what we want to do is to celebrate the successes, however small, in adopting the UK BIM framework. And that is our primary role. Our primary role is to promote the use of the UK BIM framework throughout the entire life cycle of a built or natural asset. Now, in terms of me wearing two hats for this slide, Building Smart UK and Ireland has always been part of the UK BIM Alliance since 2015. Not a lot of people were appreciating that out there in the industry, but that has been the fact when the UK BIM Alliance took over the running of Building Smart UK and Ireland from BRE in 2015. And Building Smart International is a global organisation that's been in existence for almost 27 years now, I think it is. And they create open standards, open processes, open tools and resources for us to, as an industry, to use to describe the built environment. Anyone who's come across Building Smart would, of course, understand that they have created, through global consensus across all the disciplines, all the different regions, a digital language called Industry Foundation Classes, IFC for short. It's that language that's both computer and human readable that we should use to describe built and natural environments out there in the world. So it's a data structure, a data schema that people can use digitally, the software can understand, that people can understand, and that enables interoperability of information from one platform to another piece of software. So obviously this relationship is going to continue, and we're going to be promoting that more and more. If you visit the website, you'll see that bang in the middle of it, as you scroll down, is almost this very same slide. Just to reinforce the fact that Building Smart UK and Ireland is very much powered by NEMA as an organisation. We both sit under an organisation called Syria, who are currently our legal entity. And our ultimate vision then is, as I said before, a thriving and sustainable built and natural environment transformed by exploiting purpose-driven data. And it's really not just about saying, let's do BIM because BIM is great to do. What we're actually seeing now is a maturing of our industry by people saying, actually, we need the data in order for us to understand how much carbon we're using, how much embodied carbon, life cycle carbon, how safe our buildings are, what are the consequences of something on something else. And it's the data thing that is driving this. So it's a data-driven and exploiting the data to make our lives easier in whatever we're doing. And I always have very extremes of this, whether it's simply just going home on time as whatever you do in your role in our industry, or whether it's contributing to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There's everything in between that. We can start to use purpose-driven data and information to solve and help and enable anyone as part of this industry to better do their job more accurately. So those behaviours I was talking about, changing our behaviours, we're looking at inspiring people. And this comes through a very real acknowledgement that we're quite jealous of the whole digital twin programme, which seems to be attracting attention, whereas information management and BIM hasn't really managed to do that. So that compelling story, those reasons for doing this, and if we didn't already know, information management is a core fundamental thing when it comes to digital twins. When it comes to all of the other sexy types of things that we see going on in the industry, whether it's technology or software or whatever it happens to be, there's always information management required throughout all of those things. So we're going to be inspiring people. We've had some success stories on the website. There'll be a few more of those being completed over Christmas. So in the new year, you'll be able to have a look at more of those success stories. We're influencing, as we've always done, various different government groups, various different industry working groups. We'll continue to do that. Connecting different groups of people to make sure that we're supporting them in the right way, hopefully leading to transforming of the industry at a quicker pace than it has been. As we said, information management has always been our focus. It's always been there. It's written on the front of the ISO 19650 documents. It's there. It's all about information management, but we are not throwing BIM away. We're building on what we've achieved as the UK BIM Alliance. We will bring in the BIM discussions at the right point, at the right time, so as not to turn people off of the discussion. And that has been the case in the past, where people have shut the conversation down because we'd mentioned BIM. But what we're finding now already is it's proven its worth in focusing on the information management because it has opened doors that were previously closed to us. So in short, with trusted data, great things happen. And that's what we're looking to do, get people to understand that the data is created. There's a certain way that you can do it. There's a process, a workflow through the ISO 19650 documents to ensure that we can make great things happen. So in terms of goals, we will continue to provide leadership across the UK BIM framework. That's still there. It's still absolutely relevant. So coordinating it with British Standards Institution, we're still absolutely driving that forward. And in the new year, we'll start to look at refreshing the resources there and making the website easier to navigate and everything it needs to be. And we are looking to drive a data-centric attitude to the built environment through various different appearances at conferences and exhibitions. And we are there to inform, collaborate, and add value to other transformation initiatives. There are other digital initiatives out there that don't necessarily know that the information management process, the common data side of things, the structured data things, the open BIM things, they just don't know these things exist. So it's for our job, our role to raise those issues in those places. And where in the past the UK BIM Alliance have attended a few key events throughout the year and expected people to come to us, again, recognising that wasn't perhaps the most beneficial way to do things, we're actually now going to more smaller events. So we will be taking our things to other people and talking in their language rather than expecting everyone to come to us and talk our language. So in terms of what NEMA are, NEMA is a group of volunteers, as I've said, but we're there to facilitate various different things that happen in industry. So whether that's one of these verticals is Building Smart UK and Ireland, whether it's the UK BIM framework, whether it's an upskilling framework, whether it's resources that we create in terms of the guidance documents for ISO 19650, whether they're individual projects, whether it's impact reporting, checking that what the industry is doing, how it's digitalizing, and what effect NEMA are having positively on that. These are all things that we enable. And there is a small group of support services, some of which are paid, that we pay through patronage, but it's comms, it's admin, it's event planning and things like that. Everyone else is there doing their role, offering their time for free to make sure these things happen. And then we have our usual things that, again, that are what we call the back of house things: program management, change management, impact monitoring, governance, strategy and funding, all of which people ask for. What is this organisation, NEMA? What are they doing? How are they set up? And there is a background set up just to make sure we're in compliance with our legal entity, as I said, which is an organisation called Syria at the moment. So we're there doing what we can. As I said, we are all volunteers. The more volunteers, the more we can do. We've got quite lofty aims and goals. So if there's anyone on the call that wants to support us in any way, please let me know. We'll gladly take that help. So in terms of new ventures and relationships that have happened either through the launch or since the launch, Zero Construct. As you mentioned in the introduction, I sit on the advisory board of Zero Construct now, and they are an organisation, a global organisation, just under 1,000 members now. They're creating a decarbonisation playbook, which I believe will be launched in either January or February next year. And we have a crossover event with them on the 18th of January, bringing information management, open data, and decarbonisation together. So having those conversations together to understand what needs to be done, where there's gaps needs to be filled, and what we can build on with Zero to make decarbonisation of the construction process a real opportunity for change. We have a new international platinum patron in Glodon. And again, a really helpful platinum patron who donate money to us for us to be able to do the things that we do, attending events, making sure we can create and publish various different guidance and tools. Really good relationship with these guys so far, looking to actively be involved in projects as well. So they're committing their time and resources as well as finance. And the Real Estate Data Foundation. So we're bringing these guys on board as affiliate members. They are a membership organisation already, but what we're doing is strengthening that relationship with them. Now that it's information management for lifecycle, they're absolutely part of what we do. So we will use our news, our resources, and funnel that through the membership of the Real Estate Data Foundation. So that's bringing information management to the real estate side of things. So in terms of new ventures, the Building Safety Alliance are now friends of NEMA. We will continue the work with the UK BIM framework, as we've said, and also with Anne Kemp, chair of NEMA, and myself. We sit on the Construction Leadership Council digital network, looking to roll out digital across the government networks and make sure people are connected in the right ways as they should. And then finally, not necessarily a new venture, this happened just before the launch, but Building Smart UK and Ireland produced an IFC special report that was published in the July edition of the AEC magazine, and it's written in layperson's language. So if anyone wants to understand what industry foundation class is and how it can help, how it helps interoperability and some projects that are already using it, dive in, have a look, just Google IFC special report in the AEC magazine, and you can find it in there. So as I said, we're looking to take information management to other digital initiatives. So as we've heard, we've got digital twins, we've got smart things, we've got prop tech things, we've got Internet of Things, we've got robotics, we've got AI, machine learning, all of these things that we see on screen, all in their own silos discussing digital things that relate to our industry. And part of our lofty ambitions as NEMA is to take the information management process that we've got within ISO 19650 to those organizations. We don't have to do those things. There are plenty of initiatives, plenty of people doing what they're doing as experts in those particular areas. We just want to go over to their events, meetings, workshops, whatever they are, and just introduce them to the fact that information management according to ISO 19650 exists, and that they'll be, in any luck, they'll be getting data that comes through as a structured data set in the form of open data as IFC, hopefully. So raising information management in other digital initiatives is absolutely key to the direction of NEMA. So now we're going to switch tack a little bit and start to talk a little bit about the single source of truth. And again, this is perhaps, again, part of that the misinformation or misunderstanding that has gone ahead out in industry. And we're just going to deal with a couple of those points very quickly before I hand over. First of all, we do want to really get across the message that irrespective of what part you play in the industry, we're all information managers. So whether you're creating information, consuming information, using information to make decisions, or whatever it is you're doing, we all have to manage that information, access that information in some way or another. And that's the message, is that not all people would identify as being BIM people, but they would absolutely, hopefully if they agree with us, identify as being information managers. not in a formal sense, not a job description, it's not a role, but you do in your daily life, in your work life, have to manage information as you're using it. So the single source of truth then does not mean that all data and information is held in or on a single platform. And that's a common misconception. We do see lots of people and experience lots of people in workshop groups, in project-related things, trying to pile as much information as they possibly can into a three-dimensional model. And that's not necessarily the right thing to do. It might be in some instances, it's not always the right thing to do. So what we're rather doing is saying, actually, the single source of truth means that a piece of data or information is held in a single known and possibly connected place, but not in multiple places. And that's what we're trying to achieve, that the single source of truth is wherever it happens to be, that everyone knows about. And hopefully it's all the things that we understand. It should be secure with access control and all of those things where it's applicable. But that piece of information or data sits in one place. It doesn't need to be in one place and then copied over here and then duplicated over there and then over here as well for various different uses. It's just in one place that we can connect to, download, open, consume, whatever it is. It's about the democratization of the right information. Similarly, when we talk about the common data environment, that does not also mean that all data and information is held in or on a single platform. A common data environment is an area where data or information is held in the most appropriate place and it's accessible to the people who need it. And diagrammatically, I think generally what we end up with in the industry at the moment is that people seem to think that because they have a CDE platform or software solution, that all the documents need to end up in that particular place. And that's not necessarily true in all cases. It is true in some, but not in all. What we end up with in this instance is a project document storage, which in some cases does add value. It means that you've got the information, you can find the data really quickly. If that goes on into operation, brilliant. People, staff in operation can find the information they need much, much easier than they ever could do before. But that's project document storage. That's not a common data environment. Whereas actually what the standards suggest is that you have different sources of data and they'll be held in the most appropriate place for that particular role. It might be a finance system, it might be an HR system, it might be an asset management system, it might be a model server, it might be various different things. But actually they should be connected where they need to be. Not all of them need to be, but they sit within an environment. So that data is common for its particular use or particular asset, and that environment controls all of those things. So that's hopefully what we're getting to. It's this, it's a common data environment where data and information is in its rightful place, connected and secure and available to those who need it. There's no duplication, it's all where it needs to be, it's connected to whatever else it needs to be in order to make that information accessible and usable throughout the process. So this is what we're looking at in terms of the common data environment as a single source of truth. One of those sources of information would be email. Now, we don't certainly want to condone sending files around because then you do end up with duplication and not a single source of truth, various different versions of documents, of models, of specifications, or whatever they happen to be. What we're saying is actually a lot of valuable information in terms of decisions, narrative, and all of those various different things that are written in emails as a chain of communication about a thing, about how a thing was decided or ended up being in a certain position. That is very valuable information. That in itself is helpful and needs to be maintained, not only during the design construction, but through asset lifecycle as well. And I think on that point, I can hand over to Hugh, but not before, again, I ask you to get involved, please, with NEMA and to promote the use of the UK BIM framework. And if anyone wants to scan the QR code, you'll find all of our various different links for social media channels and be able to contact NEMA and get involved wherever you can.
Great, really appreciate that, Casey. And what I would probably recommend is there is a Q&A function as part of this webinar today. So if anybody does have any questions for Casey, please feel free to kind of put your questions in there. I can see a couple have already kind of come in, and we'll be able to kind of cover those off at the end of the webinar today. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen again, and we now have kind of a couple of slides kind of talking in a little bit more detail about kind of information as part of the BIM. So we generally see there are a number of benefits to implementing BIM processes in an organization, but we see the true power of this lies in the information. So this makes up all of the information that is collated and stored at all the stages of the project lifecycle. This data can be used to improve accuracy, highlight design intent, and improve knowledge transfer to all stakeholders, and provide insight into existing projects in the built environment in years to come. As Casey has touched upon, the real issue, however, is how this information is shared. How can you be sure that you're keeping up with your compliance obligations? When it comes to compliance, many AEC businesses we speak to are focusing on two things: quality and ISO. Firms are often trying to incorporate better email, document, and information management as part of how they deal with project information and client requests. The AEC needs a clearer, more distinct focus on information management. Many firms are striving to keep up with their ISO 9001 and ISO 19650 standards, but it can be difficult to maintain without the right tools and automation processes in place, especially now that everyone on a project, as Casey again mentioned, is responsible for sending and receiving information. Everyone is an information manager. Losing or not having access to this information can prove detrimental to the business. The latest international standard of information management on construction projects is ISO 19650, which sets out the activities required to manage information over the whole life cycle of a built asset using BIM. It helps to standardize how data is classified, data security, and how information is passed from one party to another. Technology and the use of digital modeling is crucial to comply with this standard, as it allows information management leaders to create, access, and manage all information, often automatically. I'm sure everyone on this webinar has noticed there's been a big industry focus on improving communication and data sharing in the last few years. Uncontrolled email and file sharing between team members can quickly become chaotic and out of control. Given the length of projects, clear information management as described in ISO 19650 will change the way projects are approached and give the ability to focus on improving designs with the certainty that the information being used is accurate and up to date. By implementing ISO 19650, AEC firms globally will be able to accurately pinpoint who is accountable for what when it comes to the built environment. This will greatly change the way AEC industry globally operates, and we will likely see a much faster resolution to cases like the infamous Grenfell disaster should projects utilizing these information management processes go wrong. As Casey mentioned, a single source of truth is essential for all AEC organizations. While data and information is the lifeblood of project and client work, it can quickly become your downfall. Luckily for us, technology advancements are continuing to improve how we work. We have access to a massive amount of information, both inside and outside of our organization. This sensitive and often confidential information is typically stored in documents and correspondence, and it can often be quite inaccessible, stored in disparate applications by various departments or even offices. Information is the lifeblood of a project and client work, but only if it is well organized, accessible, and secure. There is no doubt about it. Filing, storing, managing, sharing, collaborating on, and protecting all documents and data files created and shared by thousands of people is no easy task. Unmanaged documents and communications can quickly become a chaotic, obtrusive, and a risky burden on your organization. The two easiest ways to create a single source of truth are by removing manual processes of information sharing where possible and increasing information visibility across the board. One thing to keep in mind is that if your single source of truth is not fully complete, it's not the truth. While companies typically manage their contracts well, we find that email and email management are a key forgotten piece of the information management puzzle. Email is the main form of communication globally, with over 333 billion emails sent and received daily. But failing to manage your emails means you don't know where your business critical emails are, how they are stored, and you can't find the information you need when you need it. Unfortunately, without a clear email management process or tool in place, employees all manage their correspondence differently. Some move emails into other Outlook folders. Some save information to their individual desktops, and others simply delete information if they don't see a need for it any longer. In all of these scenarios, the information is trapped in silos and inaccessible to the wider project team. A risk of poorly managed emails is project rework. A recent study found that 80% of project professionals spend half of their time on rework, and poor communication costs $62 million every year on average. And something we found is that when businesses don't have their project emails to hand, they are at greater risk of legal disputes. Plus, failing to make emails visible and accessible to project teams can cause issues that results in a legal dispute. According to Arcadis's 2021 Global Construction Disputes Report, the global average value of disputes was $54.26 million US, with an average length of 13.4 months. In the US, the average dispute was worth $37.9 million US, where in the UK, the average was slightly higher at $38.6 million US. Arcadis's 2022 report has indicated that construction costs globally are on the rise, driven by inflation, volatile markets, supply chain issues, and the conflict in Ukraine. They expressed that to counteract these difficult conditions, AEC organizations need to be focused on managing costs and improving productivity. Given the size of the global disputes environment, the cost of mismanaging emails is immense, and they include, number one, information being locked away in individual inboxes, 2, staff wasting time looking for the information they need to do their job, and 3, staff leaving the business or going on vacation, but a range of important information being trapped in their inboxes. Here at Mail Manager, we conduct an annual research report called the State of AEC Project Management, and in the 2022 report, we uncovered that 90% of information relating to project scope changes resides in email and also in formal documents. To break it down further, email is responsible for 47% of scope changes, and 5% of these changes only reside in a project manager's head. Alarmingly, 4% of project scope changes are not contained in digital spaces, a rise from 1% who reported this in 2021. With proper email management processes in place, businesses can ensure that all project information and correspondence is captured and accessible by entire project teams. This will reduce the risk of rework and stop project disputes in their track. Plus, you'll have this information to hand years down the line should a liability dispute arise. Plus, you'll have access to past projects to protect yourself now. As I just mentioned, we conduct an annual research report, and while I won't go into too much detail on the findings, as we'll send out a copy of the full report after today's session, I'd like to show a couple of highlights. For context, this is a global survey of over 500 business leaders in the architecture, engineering, and construction space. The first finding is that email is the most used communication and collaboration tool in the industry. Despite this, 87% of people surveyed were concerned about information visibility and accessibility in their firms, with half of businesses unable to easily access information from past projects. Next, 1/3 of AEC businesses lose critical project information with staff turnover, and less than half of respondents require employees to file all project-related emails. And finally, despite the remote working hype, a hybrid workplace is the new norm for AEC organizations, which brings its own information management challenges. Something else to touch on quickly is that in 2021, almost 2/3 of our respondents, 63%, reported experiencing some kind of dispute in the business. This year, that number rose to 78%, with the leading cause being project scope changes, payment issues, and timelines. We see that it's kind of time to start avoiding these common email headaches, having to send or receive emails saying, this isn't what we agreed, asking, when did you tell us this, saying that John has left the company, so I'm coming to this bit cold and having to be updated on what's happened on a project, questioning if people has ever sent you the relevant information, chasing a colleague saying you need to be sent the information before you're going into a meeting with a client, and generally having to ask for that information to be forwarded on to you. By implementing an email management solution that helps you maintain a single source of truth, you can experience benefits such as your data becoming discoverable, eliminating human error through automation, establishing version control, reducing time wasted on searching for documents, increasing transparency and traceability within the business, and ensuring you're complying with regulatory and legal requirements. These are all issues that were troubling Arup, and that's who created Mail Manager originally. They saw that they were struggling with their emails. They had around about 16,000 employees, and each one of those employees had their own slightly different way of organizing their information. They saw that the content of email was changing to become more contractual, and they saw a huge amount of risk as if they couldn't go back and find an email relating to a certain project and that project went wrong. They knew they would be in trouble, and that would be the key email they would have to go back and find. Put simply, what they wanted was a way they could find any email on any project without their staff losing any additional time in their day searching for information. There was nothing on the open market that worked exactly how they wanted to work, so they created their own tool. And what they created was Mail Manager. Now that tool is available on the open market, and here are the kind of key elements that we hear from our clients that we solve them on a daily basis. So we see that Mail Manager will reduce the risk of losing sensitive information because it's filed in the right place straight away. The process of filing and searching is made so much quicker through automation and a powerful search tools, so billable time is not lost with email filing. We see that we're able to kind of enforce filing consistently across the business, so you're confident that everybody's going to be working in the same way. And we're not going to allow people to silo information in their own inbox, so information is stored exactly where you want it to be stored rather than locked in different people's inboxes. So now I'll go into a short demonstration in terms of how the product works. So if I go into my own inbox, I'll show you a couple of different ways that you can file your emails to ensure that that information is stored centrally. If I take this email from Paula, for example, once I've read this email, what we'll see is different between Mail Manager and other systems is that once I've finished with this email and I'll close it down, I'll receive a prompt to file it. So rather than allowing people to keep emails in their own inboxes for it to be locked away where nobody else can see it, the idea behind Mail Manager is that it's going to point to one of your shared locations. So this is going to point the email to be filed within SharePoint, but it can also be filed within any one of your common data environments. And as Casey touched upon, it doesn't all have to go to the same place. You can pick the appropriate place for that email to be stored depending on your project requirements. So Mail Manager uses a form of machine learning to make that process as easy as possible. So it looks at where I've previously filed emails from Paula in the past. So if it's from a certain colleague or a certain client, their project will be at the top of the list. And our system can also look within the content of the email. So the subject line and the body of the text to compare this email to other emails that have also been filed. So the idea is that it's only going to be one additional click for users to click file, and that email will be filed against that project centrally where everybody else that needs to see it will be able to see it. As I said, just a really short presentation today, and we can kind of go into more detail in the future if it's of interest. So where we see that we can really help our clients is by giving users confidence in retrieval and the ability to find any email that's been filed against one of your projects in seconds. We can increase productivity by, as we talked about, reducing the time spent filing and searching will mean that there's more billable time available to do actual project work. And we've talked throughout the meeting today of the benefits of having that one place for project information. As a highlight of some of the clients that would be using Mail Manager on a daily basis, these are some of the clients across the UK that would be using Mail Manager on their projects on a daily basis. And we see that Mail Manager are proud to integrate with a number of software partners. Here on screen, some of the ones that we're currently working with, and we're always looking to improve our customers' email experience. Regardless of where you want to file your emails and project correspondence, integrating email into your project management helps alleviate risk, allow better communication, free up time for project work, help deal with staff turnover, remove the disconnection between site teams and the office, and allow you to be proactive rather than reactive to issues. So that's what I was hoping to kind of go through today. So now we can kind of move on to the Q&A. So I can see there's quite a few questions that have come in. So there's a first one that I'll probably ask to Casey, if that's okay, Casey. So
Yeah,
the first
fine.
question is, with the higher requirement of IM in the Building Safety Act, is there specific template, strategies or advice for managing the fire safety information we now need to retain digitally through the life cycle of a building?
Yeah, so in broader context, yes, the Building Safety Act introduces or moves on or takes the concept of the golden thread of information that little bit further, suggesting what documents and what information needs to be kept and retained within a golden thread. There are certain standards such as BS 8644 that sit alongside that as complementary standards, but we're working through those in terms of how applicable and usable they are. So NEMA has, one of our first projects as NEMA is a working group working with the authors of BS 8644 and members of industry, both on the fire engineering side and on the information management side, to develop a more deliverable, usable standard. In terms of templates, NEMA don't develop any, or haven't developed any yet for this particular purpose or use. When we talk about Building Smart International and Building Smart UK and Ireland, we are looking at a use case which takes the information requirements down into data requirements and says, this is how you should exchange the data on those things. That's work in progress, obviously, as the Building Safety Act has only very recently come out. I should also probably mention that Building Smart UK and Ireland is also a volunteer pro bono organisation. So yes, there are lots of complications, but as I said earlier at the start of the opening of this session, lots of people finally realising that data and information digitally is how we start to solve and understand these things. So it is absolutely key to those things and how we're going to move forward. So no, there aren't any strategy templates yet. The Building Regulations Advisory Group issued a report on how we can manage and meet the Building Safety Act. I think they published that in July last year. So yes, there's lots of stuff out there to read, but I don't think there's anything as definitive that Richard's looking forward to say, here's a template, this is what you need to do.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Casey. So the next question I think points to yourself is, what's kind of the biggest challenge that you've seen to BIM adoption? People.
It always goes this way, and the people are the biggest challenge, and that's why any transformation process starts with people, process, and then technology. A lot of people seem to be leaping, or organizations seem to be leaping straight to the technology solutions rather than dealing with people challenges first. Upskilling, awareness, and all of those things. And in BIM implementation, as I've started to say, there's a lot of misconceptions about what BIM is and what BIM isn't. And if people are approaching it as a BIM is about 3D, then it's not necessarily the right approach. There are parts of it that are, but you don't have to be working in 3D to play your part in a BIM process. So yeah, by all means, absolutely, people are the most difficult part of the transformation process.
Okay, perfect. So the next question I can kind of start off answering, but then I'll kind of be really interested to kind of have your input as well. So should everyone in a business be filing project emails? So we would generally see with kind of a system such as Mail Manager, there's kind of a huge benefit for everybody to be involved in terms of if that person leaves the business, making sure that you can kind of track kind of what's been said, what they've kind of said to clients, because otherwise that information is lost and there could be a huge amount of information drain within the product, within the kind of the company. Even what we do see with a kind of a product such as Mail Manager, there are potentially people working in a construction site that don't need to file their emails if they're just receiving kind of company-wide emails rather than kind of interacting with the client. But anyone that's kind of interacting with the client, we would see there's a kind of a huge amount of value being able to kind of track their information. Casey, kind of any kind of thoughts on that as well?
Yes, I'd agree with you. Yes, they should be. I've been using Mail Manager. I started using it probably 13, 14 years ago. And during that time, I spent 4 years at Arup. So I was both a user of a standalone product and then involved in working and using the Mail Manager products within Arup as developers were developing new tools and things. And Yeah, I mean, everyone should be filing. Mail Manager, even back then, was clever enough and intelligent enough to understand when there was duplicates, so the system works out what's a duplicate and what's not. So yes, it should be filed, and it just gets people into the good habit. If you say you should, but you shouldn't, and you should and you shouldn't, then it creates confusion within the application implementation of that software. If you just say everyone should be filing their emails, then it's an easier instruction, and it's very easy to do. It's literally whatever system you're using. When you hit send, it says, right, do you want to say file this? And it takes more work to not file it than it does just to select a folder and file it.
Great, perfect. So the next question is from Patrick, and it's quite long, so I'll do my best to read it out. The construction industry project model is typically based on multifaceted teams formed from many different companies and groups. What needs to change in the setting up of project teams, practically and contractually, so that project information can be best shared before, during, and most importantly, after in perpetuity for the asset owners to make the planning, construction, and operation maintenance of the built assets fit for the modern era?
Okay, so yeah, what basically Patrick's question is that there's lots of things that need to change, because generally we're all a bunch of new people. I'm an architect by background, so we're all a bunch of new people in a new team working to deliver a new thing that probably hasn't been built before. And that's what the ISO 19650 suite of documents absolutely acknowledges. The ISO 19650 documents came out of, or is an evolvement of the British standard BS 1192 series. So absolutely acknowledge the fact that there's lots of different things that need to happen and change, but it works through a process of understanding what information is needed to be procured, procuring it in the right way through BIM protocols and contract amendments. There's templates for those, all available on the UK BIM framework website. Then delivering and checking the information, delivering that as data, and then handing that over through construction operations, building information exchange into the asset management side of things. So it's all outlined within that process. It's a life cycle process that's listed within ISO 19650, and helpfully it's now an international standard, which means there's generally global consensus on how things should be done. So yeah, there's lots of things to change, but there's a process there and a framework that we should be working within to mean that everyone's working to that same process rather than trying to find their own way.
Great, perfect. So the next question is that not everyone on a team should necessarily be able to see all emails. Is there a way to keep certain emails only visible to specific team members? So I'll take that one. So Mail Manager stores your emails within your own IT infrastructure. So your emails are either stored on your internal data server, on your SharePoint site, or with a kind of a number of different CDEs that you could be using. Mail Manager, because it's storing within your own IT infrastructure, will be mirroring the permissions of wherever you're filing it into. So if a user has access to a certain folder, they can file and search through that folder. If they don't have access to that folder, they can only they won't be able to file or search through it. So they won't be able to see any information that they shouldn't be able to see. So as a business, you can keep kind of track of who can see what and manage those permissions. So the next question is there a difference between a single source of truth and a common data environment? So I think that's one for yourself, Casey.
It is, yeah. So not really, no. It's terminology. I mean, the common data environment is something that is referred to in the standards and says this is what it is, this is what it could be, this is how the information moves through from various different phases in a project into the common data environment, what it's used for, whether it's a project information model or an asset information model. There's information that runs through that. So no, there's not really a difference. It's just a terminology, and the common data environment is something that was chosen to be defined and used in those standards as terminology. Single source of truth tends to be just a common way of saying it.
Perfect. So the next question is asked by two different people. So Ben has asked, if three people from an organization file the same email, does it save the email 3 times? And someone anonymously has asked the same question. So I think Casey's referenced it already. Mail Manager is able to recognize if it's the same email and only save one copy of that email to the folder. So because you're saving everyone on the project saving it to the same folder, Mail Manager can recognize through the metadata of the email that it's a repetitive email, so only save one copy of that email. So you're not going to have lots of the copies of the same email stored centrally. So I think the last question, unless any more come in, is from Kerry, and can your project run on an Apple Mac? At the moment, not. It's only a PC plugin. It is on our roadmap, so it will be available in the future to work on a map, and I think on a Mac, not a map, sorry. And I think that's kind of due at some point in kind of the first half of 2023. So I'm sure when that's available, there'll be a kind of a big email campaign. So I'm hopefully you'll kind of notice that when that comes out. So I think that's all the questions answered. So I think the last thing to do is to say two thank yous. So a big thank you for kind of Casey for your time today and kind of running through the presentation and that Q&A, and also kind of a big thank you for everybody for attending today and kind of taking the time out in the last week before Christmas to kind of join the meeting today. Perfect. So I think that's everything today. Casey, do you want to kind of talk about, or kind of mention again your do you want to bring that QR code up for one last time before we go?
I can do, yes. Let me share my screen. Yep, there we go. So yep, QR code will be on screen any second now. But yeah, that will take you to a link tree that has all of our social media on there, and you can get hold of us through any of those channels, whether it be LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whichever is your easiest method. But you can also find me. Just click on the link, and you'll be able to drop us an email that will come through to info@, and it will find its way to me. But yeah, any support, any help, any contributions, any expertise from your particular domain, by all means get in touch. There is probably geographically a NEMA region, used to be the UK BIM Alliance regions, near you, and also from a discipline or domain point of view, there's probably a BIM 4 group. There is a BIM 4 housing associations, BIM for retail, BIM for water, BIM for rail. There is a specific group for you. So again, they're all coordinated and supported by NEMA. But yeah, if you want to get involved in any of these things to learn more about information management or BIM, then please do get in touch.
Perfect, great. Well, thanks for your time, Casey, and for everybody for attending, and hopefully we'll be able to speak to everyone again in the new year.
Great, thanks everyone.